Engage quantum drive.
Before we get into the episode discussion, Katie has trivia.
I sure do. To get started, Brandon Fayette, who is a visual effects supervisor for season 3, helped redesign the Union shuttle for this season. So if you've watched this show from season 2 to season 3, the shuttle looks vastly different. And it's been quoted that the crew has called it a wooden shoe look for the old shuttle.
That's funny.
But now they've made the shuttlecraft sleeker, and I feel like in this specific episode we really got a chance to see them up close and personal.
The body looks a lot more angular, and it just looks cooler. I can't necessarily say what I like so much more about the new one. It just looks better, but I'm not that kind of a designer, so I might not be able to put my finger on it.
It looks more aerodynamic, if that makes any sense. It just has... It does. Sleek is a really good way to put it. It just has cleaner lines, and I don't know. It reminds me vaguely of a krill vessel just because it's got some of those like sharp points on it. But yeah, I think that you can definitely see the upgrade this season in the shuttle. So one of the producers and editors on the show, Tom Costantino, has hidden his voice somewhere in this episode. So if you find it, please comment and let us know that you found it. But apparently, lurking in this episode somewhere, you can hear Tom's voice.
Friend of the show, Tom Costantino. And I don't want to say exactly what our theories are because we don't have any confirmation of it. So we want to make sure that we have it right before we share it with you.
Yeah, I want someone to like come out of the woodwork and be like, hey, I found it. So... You know, I watched this episode, listened to this episode like a hawk, and I don't know. So that's a fun little fact. So look for Tom's voice in this episode. Also, the underlying theme of this episode has been compared to similar episodes from Star Trek: The Next Generation in the 2 episodes called Where Silence Has Lease and Allegiance. Both involved an alien species trying to learn more about their captives and presenting them with challenges to overcome. The aliens essentially experiment on the crew for information and knowledge, and in both the Orville and TNG, the aliens tried to justify their actions by saying no one was in any real danger, and then not acknowledging that holding the crew captive and putting them through trials is problematic.
Yeah.
All for knowledge, but it's a very interesting discussion, and so if you loved this episode, you can dive into these 2 episodes of Next Gen and kind of explore that idea a little bit more.
Yeah, I feel like we'll have some things to say about that for this episode.
I agree with you on that. During the shoot for this episode, and perhaps other episodes as well, the crew had to be mindful of shooting around Jessica Zor because she was pregnant during some of the filming and the baby bump was starting to show and become more noticeable.
Yeah.
So that's just always interesting. It reminds me of like sitcoms from the 90s. Like where they would make them hold a box or something. And like, you just notice like specific, actors walking around with like boxes in front of their stomachs, or the couch was just right in the same spot. But I didn't even notice. So that was just something that good on them. I didn't even have an inkling.
Yeah. At this point, I feel like that's an art in and of itself. The ability to hide that from an audience. Although I have a feeling like at some point in the future, they're just going to like digitally fix it. Fix is the wrong word. Digitally hide it.
CGI has come a long way. Like sometimes I'll see actors doing interviews for stuff and they're like, oh yeah, they had to like CGI my hand for the entire movie.
Yeah.
And it's like, because they, cut their hand, they had a bandage on it or something. And I'm like, holy crap, I didn't know that we had the technology, but apparently they also have the budget for that.
Yeah.
That can't be cheap. Most of the filming of this episode concluded sometime before mid-March 2020, which was right around the big shutdown we had in the United States due to COVID-19. So some of the remaining scenes were not filmed until the end of 2021 because of the pandemic and also because of shooting around Jessica Zor being pregnant. So yeah, a couple things to work around for this episode. I think COVID was a big one, but there's some scenes in this where like the high school, so many people are in there, and just like that's one of the first things I noticed about watching this episode is the amount of people in one small space. And I think the pandemic has made me more aware of those things.
For sure.
So I specifically wanted to look this up since I was like, wait, was this filmed during the pandemic? And no, just right before the cutoff.
Although when we talked to the producers, they did tell us that regardless of the pandemic, they wanted to make sure that this show didn't show signs of it being like restricted amounts of people on a set or anything like that. They didn't want it to look like a show that was filmed during the pandemic. So they did everything they could to keep it as safe as possible. And we end up getting a show that looks as it should without any kind of sacrifices made for that.
That is true. I didn't think about that. I will say that just triggered something in my brain in the last episode, Shadow Realms. I had that question of like, where is everybody on the ship? Maybe that was because of COVID. And since it's a horror episode, it kind of fit with the narrative. But yeah, sure. I know I can speculate for days about these things, but I just noticed like the large amount of people. And I was like, wow, my brain has shifted to noticing that more just because of our world. Moving on to guest stars, the first one is Morgan Baston. She played the girl whose locker is blocked by Bortus, and she shares a brief conversation with Ed. And you may have seen her in FX's American Crime Story anthology in season 1, The People vs. O.J. Simpson, where she played Khloe Kardashian. I saw that and I was like, I have to share that. Just I think that's kind of a neat one. I actually watched that season of it. It was pretty interesting. So I noticed that she was in this episode, and then also Jessica Belkin, who plays the popular girl who's mean to Bortus, which I have problems with because it's Bortus, played a character named Wren with a vampiric streak in the hotel season of American Horror Story, which you probably don't watch American Horror Story.
I have not seen either of those shows.
I've seen like bits of American Horror Story. And I've started seasons. I actually started the hotel season, but I never finished it. So maybe I would have remembered that. And last but not least, Elizabeth Gillies, who played the alien at the end known as Denal, has been in a lot of prior shows and movies, and she's currently in the TV series Dynasty. But she was also in the show Victorious from Nickelodeon, which I believe is where Ariana Grande got her start as well. So that was a big, I think it was past my time, but Victorious is like a very popular Nickelodeon show. She also had a guest spot recently on Family Guy where she played a character called Alana in an episode entitled All About Alana. And that's from this year. And she's also an accomplished singer as well as all of her acting credits.
I know she also recently did the voice for Catwoman in a DC animated movie called Catwoman Hunted.
Oh, nice. So she does a lot. But I don't think this is going to be the last we see of her.
Something tells me.
So, that's all the fun facts and guest stars from this episode. Hey, thank you so much for watching. This is just a segment of the full podcast that Rob and I do. So if you want to hear more of our thoughts and full episode discussions, go to thegeekgeneration.com/quantum drive.